Hello friends, this is Jeannie from Dollhouse Rescue and All Things Miniature. I am back in my workshop today and I am working on a floor by special request. One of my dollhouse friends asked me a question recently, and I get to ask this once in a while, and I couldn't see that I really had a real good video that would show you what I would do in the case that she came up with. She has actually a house just like this. Hers is in probably a little better shape. This is a Marxa mansion, or I call it a Marxie mansion because I think that's so cute. And hers is very similar to this. It's got a little rest back here. Hers also has a circle of rest here, which mine doesn't. All mine has some little tiny rest spots, which we'll probably deal with, and over here. And then here on the edge, I've got a bend I've got to get straightened out. And then here I've got a bigger rest spot. Now her concern is on her spot out here, how is she going to try to paint that and match that pattern? Well, we're going to give her some ideas. This also has a little bit of issues here on this rug. That will be an easy fix because it's just going to be white on white. I'm not real concerned about the flowers. I have to clean this and I have to straighten it before I can do anything else. So I'm going to do that. But I've got one more floor I'm going to work on for her also because she also has some issues with this floor. Now, on mine, my patio is in pretty bad shape. Hers is in pretty good shape. But I'm going to touch up a few of these blocks just to show her what I would do. I am not going to do this whole floor today. This house is kind of in my future project box. Over here, I've got quite a big area that needs to be sanded and repaired in the bedroom. There's some issues over here. I'm not sure how much of that I'm going to do. But for sure, I'm going to do a little bit on this patio. And I'm going to do this living room so she can see how to do it. First, you can watch me straighten that out. Then I'm going to wash it off. And then I'll start painting. So I'll do that part real fast. Full disclosure, today I'm using this bottle, but I have filled this bottle up with Awesome Cleaner because my spray 9 had just run out, and I happen to have Awesome Cleaner, and I like this spray pump better. It's easier to use. So that's what I'm going to use to clean it with. Remember, this happens to be Awesome Cleaner. I do love the spray 9. I just happen to be out of it right now. Let's get that stuff done, and then we'll come back and paint. Let me remind you, I always spray on my cloth and not on my dollhouse. I want to avoid getting moisture anywhere in here where maybe it would have trouble drying and it could cause rust. So I always spray just right on my cloth and wipe with that, and then rather than spraying any liquid on my dollhouse. I have cleaned it several times now, and it's much better. Now, this house, as I recall, I got at a little antique store out in the country along a little 2-lane highway. And this house had been stored outside at that little antique store they had a covered porch. So I think that's why there was so much dirt as well as quite a little bit of damage to it. This house, I also do absolutely believe it can be rescued. I already rescued it from the antique store, but I think it can be brought back. And I might use a combination of techniques on this, but for today, we're going to work on this right here. As a reminder, when you clean your houses, I forgot to give you the reminders. If it's a house or a model that you have not worked with before, or a cleaner you've not worked with before, you'll want to do a test washing first on the back to make sure that the paint doesn't get tacky and you're not removing too much paint as you clean. The other thing is you don't want to rub too hard because you really can wash those graphics off. It doesn't take a lot of pressure to wash all those off, and then you start from scratch with either a complete new floor covering or some kind of replacement if you do too much damage on your floor. Let me get it straightened out. Remember, I use a piece of hardwood floor like this, and I use a rubber hammer, a rubber mallet. This looks like metal, but it's hard rubber, and I'm just going to bang it into shape. Really, it never ceases to amaze me how little effort that takes to get those back into shape. A few pounds. Honestly, I have spent maybe 4 or 5 minutes just on that. I always start pounding lightly, and I pound harder and harder until I get it the way I want. Again, this house, it's got quite a little bit of stuff that needs touched up to make it beautiful, or it could be overlaid with another type of flooring or a copy of an original floor. I do think on this living room, I'm going to paint all of that the bad spots, just the bad spots. Let's do just a little bit of sanding, mainly because it's a little rough to the touch. I usually only sand if it feels raised, like that rusted area is raised higher than the rest of this. And this is a little bit. Up here, I think I'll do also light sanding. I use a light grit paper. I sand just a little tiny bit at a time. I use just the tip of my finger under with that sandpaper and just go in little circles. Don't sand out here where you don't want to remove paint, otherwise you end up painting a bigger area. So I'll just confine my sanding with my finger and that sandpaper to these little bit of areas here. Then I wipe it off with probably rubbing alcohol, or you could use your Dollar Tree cleaner again and get that rust dust wiped off of there. Here's my little piece of sandpaper. I like to use a fine grit. The bigger the number, the finer the grit. This is 180. So I'd use 180 or higher number to get a fine grit. And I just use a little tiny piece. I can even probably tear a little piece off of there. Keep the rest of this for later. All right, sanding's done. We're going to talk a little bit about this groove here in the back. Now, as far as I can tell, Mark's houses always have this. And let me see what other ones do. I did a quick check. My T-cone that I have sitting out here does not have that groove. My Mark's split level does not have that groove. The Play Still does not have the groove. The Mark's Colonial, the smaller one, which is sitting here, going to be my next project, and the Mark's the Mansion both do, and I think some of the other Mark's might also. But I believe that is for stability. But what we find on some of these older vintage houses, depending on where they were stored and who stored them and so on, is sometimes moisture has gotten down in there and made that rusty. So you'll want to clean it out. First of all, it's likely to be dirty in there. And then I did a little bit of sanding in there, and we are going to fill that in with the appropriate color paint, probably kind of a light gray or very light taupe like this. But you don't have to worry a lot about the pattern in there because it's not going to show. It's in the back of your house, the back of your room, and when it lays flat like this, you don't really see down in that groove. If it needs a little pattern, we'll add it, but probably we will not. I'm ready to get started. This is what I use for a palette. This is actually a plastic cutting board that I've had a while. I've covered it with paper, like parchment paper, that after a while I'll just rip this off and throw it away. And then I don't have to worry about washing that palette all the time. So, but since I'm just going to paint a little bit, I'm going to use my palette like it is. I've used it for a couple of projects, but I'm going to use it like it is today. For our paint, I use acrylic paint, and I'm going to use brown and white and black. I have found with dollhouses, if you think it's light gray, it probably needs a little brown in it. And in fact, a lot of dollhouse colors need a little brown added just to subdue them a little bit. I think probably because of their vintage nature. I'm not sure. But a little brown tends to help match those original colors. And I'm just going to use a little dab of paint. It doesn't take much, and I will make up more as I need to. Now, somebody asked me recently, why acrylic paint? Well, first of all, it's inexpensive. You can find it lots of places, Walgreens, Hobby Lobby. You can find it online, Michael's. A lot of people carry it. The other thing is, it's easy to use, and it's easy to mix, and it's easy to wipe off, even when it's dry. If you're not happy with what you've done, just wipe it off. Now, that also makes it kind of a little bit semi-temporary, because down the road, if you wash it, you could wash it off. Well, I'm probably not going to wash this dollhouse again in a hurry. And if I do, if I damage the paint, I would touch it up. You could also seal it with something. I don't usually. Sometimes I think when I seal it, it kind of causes brush marks that I'm not happy with. So I'm just going to paint it, and it will be a little bit duller in those areas, but the floor will look so much better painted. You'll be surprised how quickly it starts to look better. So I am mixing up my white, and I'm going to start with a gray. So white and black, and I make a separate pile here. so that if I want to use my white for something else, I've not, got it all contaminated with black and brown. And I put my brush in the black, and then I kind of tap it to the side because you just need a little tiny bit of black, and I can always get more. And then look, we've already started. We've got a nice, very light gray there. It's probably a little bit too dark. I'm going to put a tad of brown in there because, like I said, you almost always need a little brown. It's really almost more of a taupe, I think, than actually a gray. So get that in there to start with, because I know from experience it's going to have to be there. And I'm going to add some more white because I think I made that a little bit dark. Now your first coat, you're just going to kind of cover up that rust. So you're really not too concerned about if the shade's right or wrong. We'll color correct with our next coat, and also we'll add a pattern. But you'll be surprised how much better it looks just putting this on. Let's go ahead and apply this to those rusty spots. That has gone really well, and that color was a good match. So I actually used up on my little dab of paint here, but now it's easy to make more. I mix it right here on the palette, and I can see what shade I need it to be because I've got that big blob right there on the palette. So I'm going to do that same thing, add a little brown, a little white, maybe just a teeny black, which I'll tap off a little bit before, so I don't get too much in there. There we go. And again, this, you don't have to exactly color match this coat. The other thing that I'm doing that is just so effective, I can't believe really how easy it can go, is once you put that coat on there, that base coat, it looks so much better already. I'm filling this crack in pretty completely because remember it's in the back of the room. If I want to do something later, I can do something more to that. In the meantime, look how much better that looks already. These little rusty spots up at the top, maybe you can't see those, but there's a bunch of little rust ones. I just dab that paint on there and then I kind of wipe it off. And I'm not even going to worry about doing anything other than that. I'll tap that on all of those, then kind of wipe it off. And that does not cover up that pattern underneath. And it looks so much better already. It's just, like I said, it's not that I'm that good at this. It's that it's really pretty easy to do. A lot of those little rust spots. I would do that same thing on the, there's lots and lots of little rust spots out here in the middle of the floor, which you may or may not be able to see. But all of those I will just touch with my light gray paint, and then I'll just wipe it off, and that absolutely makes those little spots disappear, and it does not cover up the pattern. So that, I'll do that to that whole living room floor, every single rust spot. And there's, probably hundreds and hundreds of them. But they'll all be just tap, 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 and cover those up. And then that floor, I mean, it just looks, I don't want to say like new, but it definitely looks refurbished, looks so much better. Okay, so I'm going to finish that up. Now, I have yet to do anything where I'm going to really replace the pattern because pretty much up here, I think that's all this is going to take. But I know my friend's got a spot where she wants to actually try to replicate the pattern because her spot's out here in the middle of the floor. And so over here, I'm going to pretend this is in the middle of the floor. Now I'm going to do that. So let's put our base coat on there and then come back and try to replicate that pattern in that corner as best as we can. But first, we'll cover that all that rusty area with my base coat. In this case, it's this, very light gray or light taupe. And I'm just going to cover all that up. I'm even going to hit this tab up here because it was completely rusted too. So look at it, it just looks so much better already. Honestly, if I wasn't going to try to show you how to do a pattern, I don't know that I'd do anything else on this corner of the floor either. Let's get that filled in. When you're doing your floors, don't forget to turn it flat and hit this front edge. Now, you don't necessarily have to have pattern along here, but you do want to cover up that rusty area. So when this is sitting on display or being played with, that will look nice and clean and well cared for, well maintained. It'll look like somebody cares enough about this house to make it look nice rather than see how when that's rusty, it just looks like dirty and grubby. Well, we don't want it to look like that, especially if somebody might be playing with it. Maybe your grandkids will be playing with it or neighbor kids or some friends or somebody. So you want that to look nice, just like what you would your real house. That looks so much better. And honestly, if it wasn't in the middle of the floor, even if it was in the middle of the floor, it's almost good like it is. When you have a thin coat of paint, you kind of have that light and dark kind of a natural pattern showing through. So I'm really pretty happy with it just like it is. But because I promised I was going to try to show you replicating a pattern, let me get a little bit darker paint and see if I can just kind of replicate. This has got some little scrolls. So I'm just going to try to dot, dot, dot and do some little scrollies through here just to kind of replicate it and see how that goes. All right, so I'm doing it just a little different than I said. I mixed up a little bit lighter color, and I'm going to put some lighter color because I think this darker that I put down is more the color of that darker pattern. So let me put some lighter through there and see if we can make that look like it's a kind of a darker, make it look like the darker is the pattern, but actually I'm adding the lighter on there. And I'm just kind of tapping, and I'm sort of trying to do it a little bit scrolly like the original was. So if you looked at it, unless you're looking at it close, it would look very much like the original. Let's fill it in and see how it looks. I've worked on that a little more, and you know, I actually think I did the opposite of what I said. Instead of going in with a darker, I made that a little lighter, and I made those little swirls on there with a little bit of a lighter color. Because that's what it looks like here. It looks kind of lighter in the background, and then you can see the dark. And instead of painting this way now, straight, I'm using like circles like this to make it little swirlies, little light colored swirlies in there to match that floor. You know, it's really looking pretty good. And other than close inspection, now I'm hitting a few little of those rusty areas that were nearby. And when I do that, a lot of times I'll wipe it off. Honestly, it looks pretty good. I'm hitting a few rusty areas. I might try, I don't know if I want to use a little dark paint and try to stipple a little bit of a pattern on there. Sometimes if it's gray, sometimes I use a lead pencil. Let's see which one works. It's such fine work. I don't know if you can see, but a lead pencil is working very well. And I'm just kind of dotting it along in those same little curvy patterns to add a little bit, a few dots of pattern on there similar to the rest of the floor. And kind of randomly curvies. I can look down here and see what these curvies look like. But, you know, nobody's probably going to look close enough to say, well, that swirly should have gone left instead of right. So you just have to kind of give the idea that it sort of matches. So that's what I'm doing. And so although you think this background is like a kind of a solid light gray, in fact, it's sort of lighter and darker as it goes. So for you to have it lighter and darker and lighter and darker, that's very much the way the original looks. Let's just add a few more of these little dots on here, and then we just might call this good. I'm really hardly putting, it's sort of like a little pattern, but mainly just some little darker dots on there, kind of trying again to go in that little swirly pattern to match the original. I went back and added even a few more light colored swirlies even after I did my pencil dots. I covered up some of those pencil dots. It's really looking pretty good. If you saw this in my doll room on display, and especially if it had some furniture in there, you would not look at that floor and say, oh, what happened to that corner? You wouldn't even notice that there was anything particularly different about it. Just for the sake of trying it, I'm going to get a little darker paint on my brush and see if I can put some dots on there. I think I'm liking it. Now I have switched to, it was a flat edged brush, and it's one I've been used to I've tapped with before. So it's a little bit frizzled on the end, but that's going to work well because I want to make some like sort of little dots or shadows in a curved pattern. And I mixed up some paint that's a little bit darker gray, not maybe as dark as you think, but a little darker than I used before. And I'm going to try to stipple like some of those curvy designs on there and just see how it looks. The beauty of acrylic paint is if I don't like it, it's easy to wipe off and to redo it. Either start over fresh or just back up a layer or two. See, that's sort of, I don't know if you can even see how I made some little curvy, light, a little bit darker colored like swirls in there to kind of match the original. And I'm just using really light taps and keeping that circular pattern as I go. Seriously, it's working really well. Again, I just have a little bit of that lighter paint, and I'm going over those swirls that I thought were just a little bit darkish, and I'm just lightening them a little bit to make them match the original a little better. Honestly, I think I'm going to call that corner about done. Now, Remember, it dries just a little bit darker than it is wet. So when it's dry, I'll go back and double check my color match and make sure I'm happy with it. I'm going to repeat that same process just to see if I can do it over here. This is a little bit bigger area. I'll start with that that light color and kind of go over all of those brown, especially this spot here. And this will just have a little bit of dabs on it, on these rusty spots where it's got little dabs of brown. But this one here, we're going to probably have to do a little bit of pattern match. Let's do that just a little bit before we call it quits. I took a little break and let this dry and came back, and I do think it's still a little dark. Remember, it always is going to dry just a little bit darker than it was wet. And I want to match this light color right in here. And I think I'm a better match now. So I'm going to again go through and make some like little swirly light areas in there and let that dark show through and let the dark be the pattern. So I'm just going to go through and make some little swirly lines and see how that looks. So when it dried, it was a little bit dark. So I went back over it again with a little bit of lighter. And I also made some of these swirlies using a smaller paintbrush. Used a little bit darker gray again. And now I'm kind of going over those a little bit with some lighter again. So they're not quite so pronounced. So they're going to match a little bit more what's out here. I think I'm getting pretty close on this corner. In fact, I think I'm going to let it dry again, and I think we're going to call that done. All right, let's come back to this area. We're going to, remember, I'm going to cover that with the lighter gray again, and then come back and try to do some of those swirly circle techniques. So let's see, I think I've got this lighter gray mixed up. Let's go over there, yeah. See, this time I'm getting quite a little bit lighter than I started with last time. And then we'll see if we can layer some dark on it, and then we'll layer some a little bit more light over the top of that. And it doesn't have to fill in real solid because it's okay to have a little light dark, light dark, light dark, which is kind of what the original looks like. Okay, let's get it done. So again, I think I've got that a little too dark, so I'm going to go back over it with some light and try to, now here I can kind of see where those swirly lines are going to be. So I can kind of try to avoid the dark lines or try to match that pattern. Now I've gone back with my little brush and I've got a little bit darker gray again, and I'm putting some more swirly lines in there, and I think it's looking pretty good. It's certainly not the eyesore that it was. Now I might come back and touch just a little bit of light on some of those, just so those light lines are not quite so defined, the little dark ones I painted on there. I may go back and do just tap a little bit of light over the top of that. Help them blend in just a little bit. I feel like I could have a little more green line right in there. So we'll do that, and then we're going to call probably that section done. So it's definitely an improvement. I'm going to come back and put a light coat on this rust line yet. And all these little bitty rust spots I will touch up. But I want to make sure this little trough is filled in nice so it looks clean through there and some of these bigger rust areas. Truly, I think I'm done with those bigger rusty areas, and look how much better it looks. I'm going to pop in a picture of the before, especially of this corner up here, so you can see how much better it looks. and maybe even over here. Now I still have quite a few little rusty spots across this floor to fill in. And my friend that's working on hers, I don't think she has those. So I'm not going to spend your time and have you watch me do that. But this whole floor, any of those little tiny rusty areas, I'll just touch paint to those. And then sometimes I just touch the paintbrush to it with about that same right color. And then sometimes I just almost smear it off so that it's not evident that there's paint on there. But that will make all those little rusty spots disappear. And again, I'll do this white on this rug. But then this living room is going to be close to done. Once I get all those little rusty spots done, and this trough can be nice. And again, it's going to look so much better than it did. All right, let's come down here. I'm going to do a little bit on that patio. This is what it looks like right now. But I'm going to mix up some gray, and so on purpose these will be kind of darker gray and then get a little lighter gray. I might do this off-white, some of these grout lines first, and then do the gray. Then if I need to touch up those grout lines again. But let me get some Dollhouse white mixed up. Now as you recall, Dollhouse white means it'll be white paint with a little bit of brown in it to make it almost a very pale tan, and that will match that. So let's do that, and I'm going to do some of these grout lines. I won't do the whole thing on camera, but let's just do a few blocks so she can see what that will look like. All right, I have repainted those grout lines from about here up this way. Just the grout is done. I have not done the grout down here, and you can see it's still in bad shape. But from here on up, I've done a thin coat of white or Dollhouse white over that. And I remember to wrap around the edge and do the parts up here on this edge of the house, the part that shows, like if you're playing with the dollhouse, it'd be that part that shows, just like we talked about in the living room. So now I'm going to get some grays mixed up, and this is going to be a combination of dark gray, more to the left, and maybe even a little brown, medium gray, and then light gray to the right. And each block will be done. Now, if I get on the white, not a problem. I'll go back at the end and touch up that white one more time if I happen to get any gray on it. So this is not rocket science. You just don't want them to have one flat color. You want them to be a variegated gray, maybe even a little brown in there. Let me get some paint mixed up on my palette. So I have attempted in this part of my palette, I've got a darker gray and then a medium gray, and then over here the lighter gray, and I've got some white up here, and I've got a little brown over here if I think I need to add a little more brown to there. But that's my idea, to start and kind of maybe do a bunch of the darker gray on the one side of those blocks, and then move over and do some of the medium gray, and then do some of the lighter gray. So let's see how this color is going to look on here. Yeah, I think that's going to need to be a little darker. So actually, when I put that on there and then I kind of wiped it off, that did look kind of nice. It doesn't need to be a very thick coat on those spots with light rust. And I think my friend might find that on hers that might work very well too. So I'm just going to go over those rusty spots and then wipe that off and then see how that looks. I have a feeling that's going to be a very nice effect. Let's switch to a little bit lighter color for the middle here. And then I use my finger, kind of massage that in just a little bit. Be sure to get this front edge a little bit. And then over here, we'll put some of the very lightest. Came out good. Let me do like 6 or 8 of these and see how they look. That is extremely satisfying, and it looks so good. I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 blocks. So I'm going to continue on and at least do this part that's grouted. Then I'll come back and show it to you. Okay, I'm done for the night. So there's the part of the patio I did not do, and there is the part that I did do. Look, it just looks so much better. It looks clean and nice. Now, I'm not saying I might not go back and do a little bit more touch up here and there, but I am very happy with how it's turned out so far, especially compared to what it looked like before. This was very relaxing and pleasant to do, and I will paint this whole patio. Now, I have not decided for sure what I will do with the rest of this house. This floor would have to have a lot of paint on it. And it's my experience when you do a lot of paint on a wide area like this, where it's all one color, that you can tend to really see brush strokes from that. I would certainly want to keep this graphic in the middle. But whether I'll go through all this with yellow and cover it up, or whether I'll print out a sheet that looks just like this from another dollhouse I have and overlay it with just a piece of paper that looks just like this. Or I could even put some scrapbook paper on there, just lay on there of a different pattern or color or design, just to make it look nice. So for instance, here's a piece of scrapbook paper. I could just overlay that temporarily, leave the original underneath just like it is. It'd be a cute little red and white floor, or I could get any color that I want. I don't know. We'll see. I may paint it. We'll just have to think about it. And then this part where there's a natural division, sometimes I would consider printing out another floor from another house where this is in good shape, and then just cut out here along the natural division, and maybe here, and you leave this as painted and use this for use a paper replacement just for that part. I don't know. We'll just have to see. I would not cut out a small part and try to glue it in the middle. I don't think that would look good. But I think if you had a natural divider, you could do that. Same thing with this floor. I may be able to kind of touch that up, make it kind of a green marble effect, and then cut out the original rug from a printout from another floor where that's in good shape. And the same way with the hearth. I just am not sure what I'm going to do about that. But we'll see. It's going to be a work in progress, but at least you have an idea of what you can do to try to match those floor patterns. Thanks for joining me. As always, you have a friend here in Iowa and a lot of friends in our Facebook groups. I hope you would join us, and please subscribe to my channel. Thank you.